All right, folks, we're looking at the Renaissance today. And the Renaissance is one of my favorite time periods because it really is a rebirth of learning and a regrowth of Europe. And it's everything coming out of the Middle Ages. And we talked about, after the Crusades, the changes that are going to happen, all the ideas that are coming back from the Middle East, the classical learning, the technology, the medicine, the science, that's all coming back into Europe. And there's going to be a complete change, especially amongst the wealthy people of Europe and how they live their life and how they view their life and how they view society in general. So the Renaissance is this rebirth, and the big thing you got to understand about the Renaissance is, even though it's a rebirth, it's not going to be noticed till much later in history that this happened. It's kind of a gradual process towards the end of the Middle Ages as we kind of transition into the modern day. So let's look at the Renaissance. So what was the Renaissance? Okay, so first thing, it's a new worldview. We're going to get away from this idea of just Europe and Africa and Asia, and it's become more global. And we're going to see this globalization because the exploration period is part of this new worldview as well. Okay, so the first thing is it's a reawakened interest in classical learning. When these texts of the ancient Greeks and Romans come back, it makes a big difference in how people are going to kind of view their life. There was very rational views of life in those time periods, and it wasn't strictly centered on the church. And the church had been the center of life in the Middle Ages, but now it's going to kind of go away from that a little bit and more to a secular version, which we'll get into here in a little bit. Second thing, it's a new individual emphasis on individual achievement. I love teaching the Renaissance because it really fits teenagers. It is meant for this idea of very individualistic, egotistical, narcissistic, very driven on what I can do and what is best for me and how well can I do it. We look at explorers. Explorers wanted to explore because they wanted to be made famous. They wanted the glory that came with individual achievement. That also goes with people conquering lands. That comes with taking power. That comes with becoming pope. That even here is a very Renaissance view of religion. So this individual achievement becomes very important as we move forward through the Renaissance into exploration, into the Reformation. All right. There's also a spirit of adventure. I think the exploration time period really hits it on the head because with exploration, it's the idea that they want to get away from where they are in Europe. They read Marco Polo in his travels to the great Khanate of Kublai Khan and the time in China. So they wanted to get away. Look at Christopher Columbus. I mean, he sails west just to find a quicker way to avoid Muslims and avoid Venetians. And he runs into a brand new world that's going to be taken over very quickly by the Spanish and the French and the Dutch and the English as an opportunity to make money, but the spirit of adventure to move out and do something new is definitely there, okay? So the wanting to explore new worlds and re-examine old ideas. And again, those old ideas are very much the classical learning aspect, what the Romans and the Greeks had done to expand their world, and now it's the movement forward to expand to a global nature. All right, this is a big one. Expressing humanism. Really, kind of the focus of the Renaissance is this humanistic idea, this individualistic humanistic idea, where humanism is a movement designed for understanding in your own times, being very well-rounded, being athletic and academic and musical and personable and well taken care of. I mean, this is the general kind of overseeing umbrella or protecting umbrella of the entire Renaissance, is this idea that people had to understand who they were, what they knew, and how they fit within the constructs of this time period. And that really is humanism. And humanism stems from the idea of the humanities, all right, the expression of literature, rhetoric, and history. The fact that you can read, and if you can read well and you can comprehend and you can understand, then your rhetoric, your artful speaking can really help in understanding history, building upon history, learning that you can create history. This all fits in the humanities aspect, and it makes you more well-rounded in what you know, and it pulls in other aspects like science and medicine and math and technology and architecture all come into these different realms. And when we look at the architecture of the Renaissance, especially in the Italian Renaissance, it's very much like the Greeks and the Romans are. And then the last thing is secularism. And secularism is a big deal, so put a star next to that one too. It becomes a more worldly view. We live in a secular world today where, the church is important, but we don't revolve ourselves around the church. And during the Renaissance, the church still was a huge part of people's lives. However, it's not going to be the central part. People are going to do what pleases them within the constructs of the time period, and they're going to learn from the Greeks and the Romans to kind of bring themselves into a new person. And this really brings the modern view forward, where secularism is more important. We're not tied strictly to our religion, though religion can be an important part of our life. So as the Renaissance moved forward, this is really the modern age, and we are going through an enlightened period, which will bring us back to an enlightened period much later down the road. A great example of a humanist is Petrarch. Now, Petrarch is an older version of a humanist. He's an early humanist in the 13th century, okay, well before really the Renaissance period kind of shakes out to be. So when you look at him, he's going to assemble a library of Greek and Roman manuscripts, and he's going to bring them together, and he's going to notice all of these beautiful writings from the ancient times. And what he realizes is that that's not happening in his modern day, in his current day. So what he begins to do is begins to write, because he feels through writing becomes his outlet and his thought process. And what he does, he begins to write to people who aren't even around anymore. Like he writes a letter to Homer just to express what it would be like if he lived in his day. And he writes to Cicero of Roman times, and he writes to Boccaccio, and he just talks to him, almost like he's talking to himself, just to get these ideas out. But it really shows the individualistic nature of the time period that begins with him and will go all the way to Rabelais in France almost 200 years later. And it really kind of brings together this whole humanistic, this whole individualistic, this studying of ancient cultures, this moving forward with artful speaking idea. Okay, but of course, it's not just about the person, it's about a lot of other things that the person is going to do. So in the Renaissance, we got to understand it starts in Italy. And why is Italy the cradle of the Renaissance? Well, first of all, geography is huge, okay? It is a peninsula located in the center part of the Mediterranean, so it's in between all the trade routes coming from the west and the east. Plus, it has access up into Central and Northern Europe. So Italy really is at the heart of what is going on for this early Renaissance period, okay? Plus, if you look at the history, this was Rome. Rome was in Italy. Okay, so what the people have is they're walking around cities like Rome and Florence and Naples and Venice and Genoa and Milan are these ancient Roman cities that have been built into a modern city. So the people are seeing these Roman historical remains. Okay, and Italy had been hit really hard by the plague. But the people kind of reinvigorated themselves through their governments, whether it be a kingdom like the Kingdom of Naples or a republic like in Florence. But they're really going to reinvigorate themselves into the Roman culture because they see Roman culture every single day. Second thing is the church is still important. And the church in Rome, of course, controlling the papal states, is becoming very rich and powerful. And even though it had taken a hit during the plague, the Roman Catholic Church is still a huge part of people's lives. And what they're going to do, which is much, much different, is they're not just going to spread salvation, but they're also going to become a patron of the arts. When we talk about patron, these are people who buy things. They're going to hire artists to take care of their church. Michelangelo is going to be hired to paint the Sistine Chapel. Raphael is going to be hired to paint the library with his School of Athens. They are hired to build St. Peter's Basilica and make it beautiful. Okay, so they're a major patron of the arts, which is why if you go to the Vatican today, you're going to see the Pieta that Michelangelo sculpted in the church. You're going to see the art on the walls. You're going to see this Renaissance mentality kind of circulating around the Catholic Church. All right, and the third thing, like we talked about earlier, location definitely encourages trade. It's right smack dab in the middle. It's got Venice on one side, and it's got Genoa on the other side that have access to the Mediterranean, and those are major trading ports and major trading cities, and they're going to control a lot of what goes on. And when you look at explorers like Columbus, Columbus is from Genoa. Okay, the Venetians controlled the spice trade in the east with the Muslims. I mean, there is a lot of trade going through Italy, so they have access to everything. Now, you look at its vibrant cities, okay, Italy is not a combined country yet. That is not going to happen until the 1870s. So in saying this, Italy has these small city-states that are really either kingdoms or republics. I mentioned the Kingdom of Naples. You have the Papal States run by the Pope. You have the Republic of Florence. You have the Duchy of Milan. You have the Republic of Venice. You have the Kingdom of Genoa. I mean, you have these different city-states that are being run by either families or small oligarchies, essentially as republics, but they're really run by wealthy merchants. Who owns the money? And the money kind of controls everything, because the money is what's bringing art in, the money is what's bringing architecture in, and the money is what's building up militaries for these areas to really be strong. Okay, one family we have to pay attention to are the Medicis out of Florence. Florence is going to become one of the wealthiest cities in all of Italy and really all of Europe at the time because of this Medici family, and they're a banking family. Okay, that's what they do. They're merchants and bankers. And because they're bankers, they have the money to loan out to others. When they have the money to loan out, they can take interest back. Okay, so they are funding like France's armies, and they're making a ton of money off of it. And the Medici family is going to have a lot of control, not just over the trade that goes on, but they're going to be so wealthy that they're really going to even buy the Pope. They're going to buy the position of the Pope in the early 16th century. I mean, the Medicis have a lot of control over people, and they have a lot of control over the different city-states because of the money and what's being traded. All right, probably one of the most famous Medicis is Lorenzo de' Medici, Lorenzo the Magnificent, who is considered the ideal Renaissance man. He is good looking, he is wealthy, he is well spoken, he is highly educated, he is a politician. He can handle a lot of different aspects of life and society and really make it into his own. Okay, so he really becomes the ideal Renaissance man when it comes to what the Renaissance is like. And he's going to speak to a lot of subjects. One you will read is about, or for the honors class we'll read, is about his thoughts on love and how marriage should happen. I mean, these are different topics than what you would think out of merchants and bankers, but they spoke to everything. All right, so there's a picture of Lorenzo de' Medici. You can see he's wearing a red color of power. Again, we kind of joked that, with the selfies idea, that the Renaissance is full of selfies. Everyone wants a painting of themselves, and here is Lorenzo de' Medici. All right, and then the idea of patrons. So go ahead and put a star next to the word patrons. These are financial supporters. Families are going to buy artists. All right, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Donatello, all your Ninja Turtles, of course. These people are going to be bought by families or bought by the church to basically paint. All right. Leonardo da Vinci, one of his most famous paintings that we'll talk about, The Last Supper, was contracted to him to be painted in a cafeteria of a monastery. All right, and it becomes one of his most famous pieces of work. The Mona Lisa was a self-portrait of a woman whose husband paid for him to paint her. Okay, there's a lot of families that tried to get people like Da Vinci to paint for them, and he just didn't have the time, so he didn't actually do the work. All right, but these patrons or these financial supporters of the arts, and because of the wealth of people like the Medicis, they're really going to push Italy and this Renaissance forward. All right, other trading cities, Milan, Genoa, I mentioned Venice, I mentioned Naples. These are major cities in Italy. All right, in the next video, we're going to look at art and move forward from there.